Alright, time for another episode of Science versus Lie-ence. Yes, the liars for science. So, another draftphysics.com, debatephysics.com, also video production. Well, presentation. Very little production values, frankly. Alright, so we're still arguing something that's just so stupid that you're saying we don't need to argue this crap, right? This is a unit of energy. Okay, put it on a scale, it's collecting gravity for this amount of mass, can't collect a different amount of energy, can only collect what it collects in gravity. Too obvious. Turn the scale sideways and then I just pick anything in the universe, and so this cap, and I leave the scale compressed, hold it, and then I release it, and there's a certain amount of energy I have stored in the spring. I will release that amount of energy. So I put one weight in, I get one velocity for that mass out. That's what I get. Do the same thing, right? Except this time, okay, I'm going to put a 2 mass on instead, right? So I got 1 mass, and I'm just going to add another same amount of energy I'm putting in, doubling it. Quite obviously. It says double on the scale sideways, right? Now they say, if I take to the one thing, okay, it'll go 4 times as fast. And if I put 2 things, okay, well, they'll go more than twice as fast. I could put 4 and get the same velocity out. So instead of just putting one thing on and getting a velocity, I'll get 4 units of energy. 4 of the same units of energy out. So even though I put 2 units of energy in, I'll get 4 units of energy out. That's what they're defending. Now, of course, they can't defend that with science. They can only defend that with Lie-ence. They can only make up fake and phony and false premises. They can make, completely false and bullshit statements. But that's all they can do. They have to contrive nonsense to defend nonsense. And it's just nonsense that it takes 25 times the energy to spin a motor 5 times as fast. Nonsense. Doesn't happen. That if a water wheel is turning twice as fast, there's 4 times the energy. If it's spinning 3 times as fast, there's 9 times the energy. Not true. Windmills, anything. It's all just a lie. And they just keep defending it. And you're just like, why? Why do they just concede, okay, there's a problem, they got to fix it, because, yes, that doesn't make any goddamn sense. But no, they won't do that. Because they're just liars. So Piro has posted a comment, it's just mush, just asserting lies. So I won't bother showing the comments. It's just just no point. All right, the energy is force collected. Okay, so duh. And the argument is what are you collecting? You did 2 units of work to put the 2 mass on the scale. You can't be getting 4 units of energy. That just doesn't make any sense. It's nonsense. It's bullshit. So over time or distance, we disagree. So the fact is that, yes, I'm asserting the thing that causes the effects are time. It's how much time you're in a paint sprayer decides how much paint gets on the surface. How much time you're in any flow of energy will decide how much energy you can extract from the flow of energy. Same with photons. How long you're exposed to the sun will decide how suntan you get. But one or the other. So yes, of course, that's the argument. So at least he's conceding these 2 theories aren't compatible. They get completely different answers. You can't land on the moon with both theories. Okay, a theory of thrust being momentum or a theory of thrust being 1/2 mv squared. Both of them can't get you there. The force for the first half of the pulling spring starts at 0. So who cares? There's obviously doesn't start there. It starts at something above 0. But whatever, who cares? Technicality. And goes to 1 force. That is 1 pound, let's say. Yeah, that's all. That's it. And you can measure it. And Gosling did it. He measured it. All right. The fact is that adding the second weight gets you twice the compression. And, it's the same exact pulling force that it's applying. The second half starts at 1 force. Well, yes, 1 pound is always on 1 pound on the scale of pressure. So if I push the scale to 1 pound, I have to do a constant amount of work, and I have to constantly hold it against it, and then I can add new energy. But the new energy, I have to keep adding the constant old energy. So the old energy is this, the new energy is going to be this finger, but this finger still has to do its job. So, duh, not complicated. The one weight is on the scale, it stays on the scale, then you put the second weight on, right? I mean, there's no mystery here. The first weight goes on, it stays there. I don't take it off. It's applying the force of 1 pound. 1 pound of force. It's applying it constantly. And when I add the second one, it's still doing its job. It's still applying the 1 force, and then this is applying 1 force. 1 plus 1 equals 2, not 4. This is so... It's contemptible that you would have to have these kinds of arguments with people. It's just, it's just so bad. The human race is so fucking stupid. Incredible ignorance, belligerently stupid, and goes up to 2. So what? Doesn't go up to 4. It starts out collecting more force in the second half and goes up from there. So again, more meaning twice as much. So again, we know it doesn't weigh 4 pounds. We know it doesn't bend the spring 4 times as much. So we know this more number doesn't mean anything because we know the limitation is still 2. It has to be more force collected. Well, yes, we know it's more. Yes, no one's arguing it's less force. Idiot, moron, liar. Is somebody arguing it's less force? The argument is you're saying it's 4 times the force, and I'm saying it's just twice the force. You'll see it. You can measure the force. You can put another spring. You can measure one scale with another scale. And you'll see it's only twice the force. It has to be more force collected in the second half because every step it collects more force than there was in the whole first half. It's not more in any other sense than it's twice as much. That's right. 2 pounds is twice as much as 1 pound. What the fuck is this nonsense? So again, what is this but lying? To sit there and pretend somebody's arguing it's less? It's easier to push the scale? No one's arguing that. It's just the same amount of work to do the second half of the movement in the scale. And that's exactly what gravity proves. It's easily shown. So this is the, this is the lie. It's easily shown. No, you haven't shown anything. What's been easily shown is that Dispar and Gosling are huge liars. I mean, Gosling still has the video up where he says if you throw something at twice the velocity, it goes 4 times the distance. He still has that live video up. Dispar still has his hammer where he proved it's the same energy. Well, he put the 3 mass in the wrong location, so obviously if he puts it in the right location, they're not going to be the same numbers. So again, he proved, by doing the experiment so badly, he proved the exact case because he got the correct answer, okay, by doing the experiment completely wrong. Demonstrating that the correct answer can't be what they claim because obviously if he did the experiment right, it wouldn't have been the same answer. It's easily shown. So what a liar. It's a fucking lie. We're arguing about evidence, you fucking... See, how could you be a bigger liar than this, right? For 2 years, we can't find any scientific evidence that is credible evidence. And so these morons are contriving experiments, attempting to drop 4 pounds 1 foot and 1 pound 4 feet and try to prove it's the same energy, right? Because science hasn't done the experiment. I mean, how could this lying sack of shit, this coward who can't make a video, who can't point to one, who can't link to one, okay, how can this liar say something like this? It's easily shown. What a liar. That it collects 3 times as much force in the second half of pulling the spring. So again, he says it's 3 times as much. So he says he actually believes that in gravity, magically, the gravitational god, okay, somehow knows the difference between this motion and this motion. So somehow this is 3 pounds, but this is only 1 pound, right? I mean, that's what he's saying. He says magically this is 1 force, 1 unit of energy is on the scale. Now magically, I have 4 units of energy. I only added exactly the same energy source, and yet I have 4 units of energy now. But somehow gravity gave one of these 3 times as much weight or power to move the scale. Somehow one of these has 3 times the amount of power to move the scale. I mean, obviously that's idiotic. He doesn't have, it's not easily shown. There's no experiment that shows that. So it's just lying. All right. I mean, just disgusting that he can say shit like this. Okay, it's easily shown that it collects 3 times as much force in the second half of pulling the spring. So again, it's easily shown that exactly the opposite is true. I can put a weight on a slingshot, right? And it says 1 pound, and it's here. 1 pound is hanging here. And I just add a second pound, and it bends exactly the same amount. The second pound is doing exactly the same amount of work the first pound did. Now, Gosling did that exact experiment, proving the point. And you're arguing that you have counter evidence somewhere? Where? Where's your counter evidence? Prove Gosling wrong. Okay, the force collected in the first half is 1 unit of energy. Yes. And the second half is 3 times as much collected force. So again, you says you. Absolutely zero evidence that there's 3 times the energy. All right, 3 times the unit of energy. So there's no evidence that this is true. There's no evidence that I compress the spring 4 times twice as much, and somehow I launch now 4 things at the same speed. So with 1 compression, I launch 1 thing at 1 velocity, and at twice the compression of the spring, I can launch 4 things at that same velocity. Absolutely no evidence that's true. Okay. The 4 total units is collected force compared to the first half alone. So it's just mush. Absolute garbage. So, I mean, what is there to argue here, right? This is so bad, such a lie. It's dumber than Flat Earth, frankly. At least Flat Earthers have distorted photographs. What else do they have? They don't have much going for them, but yeah, there's a lot of photographs that because of some, parallax or some other issue, it looks like it must be a fake. Seems like, but you don't have any evidence. You have nothing to show me to demonstrate this crap you're spewing. All right, rain. Sorry. All right, so the channel 321 guy says, all right, so this is quoting me. Let's say the first movement of the spring has 1 pound of pressure. The second compression of the spring is going to be 2 pounds of pressure. Duh. I mean, it's twice the weight, twice the pressure, twice the pushers. You can think of them as football players, for fuck's sake. You have 2 of them now pushing. You don't have 4 times the energy. You got twice the energy. You got 2 of them pushing. Alright, so then he says to that, it's 1 pound of pressure only when you have completed the first compression. So this isn't about completing anything. It's just about measuring the force the object can apply. And because it is gravity, it's a constant force. So you can put it on the scale and it'll sit there and compress the spring theoretically for a very, very long time. Because it's a constant force you're measuring. The constant differential between the gravitational push up versus the gravitational push down, and you're measuring that differential. The 2 pounds of pressure when you have completed the second compression. So it's 2 pounds of pressure to get to the second compression, and it doesn't matter how long you take or how slow you take. It doesn't matter. It's not going to make any difference. You're applying the counter force. The counter force will bend the scale. It's just a fact. You are forgetting about what happens during the compression. It doesn't matter what's happening during the compression because, frankly, it's just about the fact that the spring is constantly pushing up and you are constantly pushing down. That's the fact. And the end result is you can push down with twice the force and get twice the weight. Twice the weight is not 4 times the weight. I mean, somebody has to actually say that twice the weight isn't 4 times the weight. You fucking morons will insist it is. When you are actually doing the work. So again, there's The work is constant every trillisecond it's happening, so it's pointless to measure the work involved. Because the longer you do the experiment, the more work you're going to do. The longer I hold the scale, the more work I do. So what? We're talking about how much energy it took to compress the scale, to put it into that state, and how much energy it takes to maintain it in that state. And that work is quantifiable as foot-pounds. You can just say how many pounds of pressure do you have to apply. And the fact is, twice the compression is twice the foot-pounds. During the first compression, you get 0 to 1 units of pressure. So this is bullshit, more bullshit. You get 0 to 1 pound. Yeah, it works up to the fact that you're going to move the scale. Okay, and the fact is when you finally get to some point where the pressure equals 1 pound, then you'll have 1 pound in and 1 pound against, and the scale will stop moving. So the average pressure you have to move against is 0.05. Meaningless. Okay. You want to do an average pressure over a period of time, and again, I can take as long as I want, so that doesn't make, I can make the average pressure over a second. I can make that an infinitesimally small number by merely moving very slowly. So it doesn't, this average doesn't mean anything. During the second compression, you know, the fact is if I go 1/2 the distance, then yeah, that's only 0.5. And I go a quarter of the distance, that's only 0.25. The weight. The scale measures the weight incrementally. Hooke's law works, as Ian Gosling demonstrated. So again, why don't you argue with 300-year-old science? Anyway, now the average pressure is 1.5. The average, again, is nonsense because the other weight is still on the scale. So again, you just keep denying the fact that when there's 2 pounds on the scale, there's the other pound. And you're saying the 1 pound is doing all the work. When no, they're both doing the work. If I put a battery on, this one's doing work. If I put another battery on, it's doing work. They're both doing the work. Okay, one of them isn't doing all the work. So you don't sit there and say, well, one of them had to do 2 pounds of work and the other one had to do 2 pounds of work, therefore there was 4 pounds of work done. No, one of them did 1 pound of work and the other one did 1 pound of work, and that equals 2 pounds of work. Jesus Christ, this is so fucking stupid. That's 3 times the first compression, and the total amount is 0.05 plus 0.155 equals 2, which is 4 times the first compression. So obviously it's not 4 times the first compression because you averaged it. And what do you do with averages? Oh, that's right, you divide the average, okay, by the number of things you're putting in. So if you're putting 2 numbers in, you have to divide by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Moron. Alright, so it's just so bad. I just never, I really just didn't think people were this despicably dishonest. You know, I really thought you could reason with other human beings and expect them to, you know, be reasonable, but they're not. I mean, the proportion of people who give a shit about being honest is so tiny. All they give a shit is defend their religion, jihading against the infidel. That's all they have. They don't have any other agenda. You know, humans are Muslim. Yeah, that's all they are, is crazy, fanatical Muslim retards. And they just have a different definition of their Jehovah. Oh, God, it's just so bad. Alright, so I guess we will play this stupid Gosling video. It's no doubt idiotic. Alright, there it is. So, I have to just hit this, I think. Alright, we'll make sure it's somewhere appropriate? Yeah, that's appropriately displayed. Alright, so let's play this shit. I mean, it's going to be shit. Look, he's got these little half numbers again. What the fuck are you talking about? Yes, 1/2 pound of pressure gets you to a certain location. 1 pound of pressure gets you to another location. 1.5 pounds gets you to another location. And 2 pounds gets you to another location. And by Hooke's law, those are all the same amounts of energy. 0.5 doing this is the same as the 0.5 you added here. If I actually added it in 4 weights, the last weight I add is doing exactly the same amount of work that the first weight did. Your own experiment proved it. And here you are arguing against what your own experiment proved. Amazing.
On Gary's last video, he had a comment, channel 321, who put it this way.
So I can't believe he's taking his advice from that moron. There's no way to put it, okay? You're saying that 2 units of gravitational energy makes 4 units of energy. This can only make a unit of gravitational energy. It can never get anything more than the amount of force gravity gives it. And it gives it the same force no matter how fast it's going. It's applying the force the same. So again, we're back to that argument, right? Like say something was speeding into the planet Earth, okay, at 500 miles an hour. So it goes through this distance very, very fast. They're arguing, I guess, that they actually believe that it's going to collect the same increase in its velocity that if I dropped it without moving and it slowly gained velocity, that somehow the change in the velocity would be the same. But somehow it would be going, even though it was only 1 second in this whole gravity, so it's only in the gravity for 1 second, that somehow it would still collect 40 seconds worth of gravity. Yeah. No, it won't. It just gets 9.8. So it goes 509.8 meters per second when it hits the Earth, because this whole distance only gives it 1 unit of gravitational energy. That's what gravity is. It's a constant force constantly applied to a mass. And I can't make 2 units of force into 4 units of energy. Fuck.
The pressure required, or the force, to compress a spring over 2 distances. This is the first distance. This is the second distance.
So he proved this with his own experiment. So he put the 1 pound on, it went this much distance. He puts a second pound on and the distance increases exactly the same amount. Same difference in the spring. Proving that the 2 mass are collectively adding the same force. And if he measured the force, it would be 2 pounds, not 4 pounds of force.
Would be from 0 pressure or force to halfway is 1, and then from 1 to 2. And taking the average, we got...
So again, taking the average for what purpose? Gravity is not going to give it the average. Gravity is going to give it the 1 pound of force. It's giving it 1 pound of force through the whole travel. It's still 1 pound of force. This doesn't weigh less than 1 pound, let's say. It doesn't weigh something less when I first put it on the scale. It weighs less. No, it's applying a full pound of force, and it won't stop moving down until the counter force equals 1 pound. There is no average force it's applying. That's just a lie. Okay, another one of your lies. This doesn't apply a different amount of force. It applies 1 pound. I mean, you don't understand that? If I put a pound weight on my head, it's 1 pound of weight. It's not some other kind of weight. I mean, that's all it can do is make 1 pound. It can't make some other amount of force. It makes 1 pound of force. No other amount of force. Just 1 pound of force.
0.5 for this first distance and 1.5 for the second.
So it's absolute nonsense that over the second distance anything's applying more force. It's not applying any more force, So if I put 2 pounds on, it's applying 2 pounds the whole time. It's never applying 1.4, and it's never applying 1, and it's never applying 0.5. So again, this is all contrived nonsense. Has nothing to do when a car hits at 40 miles an hour, a brick wall, it's not applying less force when it first hits. It's actually applying the maximum force when it first hits.
Distance. So we can immediately see that the second distance, the pressure is 3 times as great as the first distance.
So just absolute nonsense, right? So, I mean, how do you get more nonsensical, babbly mush, to sit there and say the average of this distance, okay, which would be 0.5, is somehow, well, this is 3 times bigger than the average of that distance, this total distance of, 4 units of that average. So what? What does that have to do with the force being applied? And what does it have to do with Hooke's law? Oh, that's right, absolutely nothing. I mean, it's just such a cheat that somehow that it's applying 1 pound of force. It's not applying 0.5. It didn't compress the spring with 0.5 amount of force. So we know that's not what it compressed the spring to 1 unit of energy with. It had to apply the full 1. So, yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Pressure or force. So that starts to give you a clue.
No, it gives me a clue again just how desperate you are to cheat. Science to cheat. Intelligence to cheat, 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 cheat. You're a lying, conniving, scheming cheater, and that's all you are. You have no regard for the fucking truth. You revealed the truth in your own experiment. There's absolutely no evidence anywhere on this planet demonstrating it takes 25 times the fuel to spin anything 5 times as fast. You just keep defending a preposterously silly lie.
And then Gary will say, well, what about my paradox? I can lift a weight up, drop it on, and it'll do that, and then that'll be 1 unit of energy, and then I can do it again. That's only 2 units of energy.
Yes, it's only 2. The fact is, again, it's only 2 things that weigh the same weight. They apply that much pressure, and it doesn't matter where you put them on the object. Okay, the fact is they're going to apply that much pressure on a spring. And the spring, by Hooke's law, is basically saying it takes the same amount of pressure to move me a certain amount of distance. So this much distance, the scale works. This much distance, half. This one, a 1. This much distance, 1.5. This much distance, 2. Oh, shit.
Get 4 units of energy out. Well, let's look at the force required. This is 1 unit of force the whole way. What's the average?
Oh, again, too silly. Again, absolute lying again about, this average crap, because the second weight, you're not going to have to lift it as high. Obviously, the scale goes down, right? So if we're going to play this game that we're going to measure how high you had to lift it to get it onto the scale, well, it's a lie, all right? Because the second weight, the scale goes, after the first weight's on, the scale goes down lower, and I have to lift it less high. So, that won't work as an argument, you imbecile. Oh, it's just such nonsense. The simple argument is it doesn't matter where I have the scale. I can put the scale down here. I can put the scale up here. It doesn't matter where I put the scale. The fact is that the weight from a certain height is, in fact, going to push the scale down relative to the position I apply the weight at. So if I apply the weight here, it pushes the scale down. If I apply the weight here, it pushes the scale down. Always the same amount, because it has the same amount of energy. One object has the same amount. 2 identical objects are creating the same identical amount of energy through their exposure to gravity. They don't create. One doesn't create 1 unit of energy, and the other one creates 3 units of energy. It's idiotic.
It's 1. So for the first compression, we're not putting in 0.5 pressure or force, we're putting in 1. Because we have to lift that force up the whole way. Of course, that's not the whole story. Gary likes to ignore the fact that there's a distance involved.
I don't ignore it. The distance is, and Hooke's law is basically saying the distance is completely proportional to the force applied. So there's no doubt about it. It's, 1 unit of distance is 1 unit of force. No question about it. You proved it with your own experiment. Amazing. Just amazing.
And he says, well, it's just a force. But let's make it easier, because let's say instead of the distance, we use a time. You have to...
So again, time is irrelevant. It's 1 pound of pressure. It doesn't matter. I can incrementally apply the weight, but I have to apply a ½ pound to get to a ½ pound, and I have to apply a constant force of a ½ pound. I can't apply it for a millisecond and accomplish the task. I have to apply it constantly.
There has to be a finite time to compress a spring. It's not infinitely quick. It's not infinitely long.
It doesn't make any difference. So again, these are such silly arguments. I can only put so much energy in here. It doesn't matter springs, or this is the advantage of them. They can take something moving at a slow velocity that applies the pressure, or they can have something hit very fast and apply the pressure and collect the energy. So it doesn't matter the time or velocity. You have a certain amount of compression, and that's all that matters. You applied a certain amount of total pressure. That's all there is. It doesn't matter whether I move the scale slowly, and now I have 2 pounds, or I move the scale quickly, and now I have 2 pounds. I only have 2 pounds stored in the spring. Oh, fuck.
So we can agree to compress a spring a certain distance would be a certain time. And let's make it easy. We'll say that...
So again, the time doesn't matter. I can use different springs that have different spring constants, and I'll change how much time that takes for the spring to compress. So the speed at which the spring absorbs the energy is irrelevant.
This length is 1 unit of time, and this length is the same unit of time. Because if we didn't use that time, what's the force acting, Gary? Is it 10 seconds? 10?
It's a constant force, which means every trillisecond it's applying the weight. So it doesn't, you can't make the object weigh less. Okay, it always weighs what it weighs. This weighs 1 pound or whatever the amount is, and that's what it weighs. Can't weigh less. Now, clearly, all right, if I minimize the exposure to gravity, that is, I take it out of, and I confine how much space over which it's going to be applying its force, that is, I make the scale smaller and smaller, and so the object has less and less contact with the scale, then yes, I can measure less. Because I'm not allowing the weight to actually be applied to the surface. But that's not an issue in any of these experiments. You're not worried about the time in any of these experiments. So describe your own experiment. Use your own experiment. Your own experiment doesn't care how long it takes to compress the spring.
Minutes, 10 hours. Those make a vast difference to the energy used.
Says you. There's no difference in the energy used. Again, it's the same. This only collects energy. It can only collect 1 pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds. That's all it can collect. It can't collect it in any other form than a certain amount of energy. And the amount of energy it collects is not going to change because you push the scale faster. It's not going to make any difference. It's collecting momentum. Gravity is momentum. I mean, again, it's just so obvious. So again, these are not arguments they'll counter. That a force applied through gravity compresses a spring. That compression creates I'll get the energy back if I turn the spring horizontally, and that'll create a velocity. And the simple truth is that an elephant, pushed will move at the same velocity as a mouse pushed. So no matter whatever your weight is, that energy, is the same exact energy to move you at a velocity, a constant velocity, away from the scale. And my argument is that's 1 mile per hour, or about 22 meters per second. So 22 meters per second is gravity's momentum velocity.
Force is not just force on its own. Energy is not just force on its own for that reason. You have to quantify the time it's acting. And usually it's done through distance, because that's work.
So it's just more nonsense. It doesn't. None of these experiments matter. We're not figuring out how long did it take to get to 1 pound. We're just saying it's 1 pound. Something weighs 1 pound, and then it weighs 2 pounds. So look at how they're trying to change this subject.
Force times distance. I know you don't like that. You hate that idea. So let's say
I don't hate it. I'm just saying prove it. So I'm going to draw it one more time, because this is their lie. All right, you won't deal with my real argument, and you just keep doing this fake lying shit. Okay, so I've drawn this so many fucking times. Here's the planet Earth. You have 2 objects. One of them you're just going to release from this point in space. Okay, this is the distance they're going to travel. The other object you gave a velocity ahead of time. It's now going 500 miles an hour when it reaches the same height from the Earth. These 2 objects, this object will take 1 second to hit the Earth. This object will say, let's take 15 seconds to acquire a velocity and finally hit the Earth. This will be going 150 meters per second when it hits the Earth. 15 seconds of gravity, 150 meters. Right? This, just rounding it off. All right. In fact, we'll have only added 9.8 meters per second. So it's only going to be going 510 miles an hour. So the same distance, this one only got an increase of 10 in its 10 meters per second increase in its velocity. This got 150 meters per second increase in its velocity. Same distance. Proving this distance argument is bullshit. You can't use your silly formula, okay, in these kind of cases. Yours only works comparing things dropped in gravity. It doesn't work as soon as I give something a previous velocity, where momentum does work, regardless of what case. Recognizing time is the real cause. Time is the real cause of the effect, because it's as I stated so many times before, it's 9.8 meters per 1 second. In 1 second, you get 9.8. Not in some other time interval. In 1 second, you get 9.8 meters of increase in your velocity. In 1 second. Not second squared, not any number of seconds. 1 second. So this liar, okay, again, just tries, it paraphrases that argument as if there's some other argument than that explicit argument. Your formula doesn't work. Okay, if it doesn't have a capacity to work universally, okay, then it's obviously suspect. And you're just a liar to claim that your formula does work when it doesn't. The more expansive, the formula that works more often, this is like an Occam's razor thing. The one that works under more circumstances is likely to be the real formula. All right.
Let's say time. 0.5 times 1 is 0.5. 1.5 times 1 is 1.5. So we get the answer of 2 units of energy when we add them together for the whole compression. Now let's do the same now with your idea. What's the average pressure or force used to lift the first weight? Well, it's 1. It's 1 all the way, isn't it? So immediately, even without the distance or time added into it.
It's 1 unit. You're only lifting it 1 unit because you're only doing it for part of the job, right? You're not going to fall this 1 doesn't have to do both units of work. It just has to compress the spring the first unit of work. So you're only lifting at one height, and you're going to get 1 unit of compression out of it. Again, it's just kind of obvious. Once the scale is compressed, I don't have to lift the second object up here. I lift the second object here. They're both going to move the spring the same distance relative to their starting point. Where you release them on the scale, the distance they will travel will be the same. Your own experiment proved it.
The equation. We've already got a greater figure than 0.5 to compress the spring halfway. We've got 1. But it's not as simple as that. We've got to play...
So again, compress the spring halfway when you're saying it's only 1/3 of the way. So again, just cheat. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous. All right, back. So let's just illustrate. Let's just pretend this spring is the opposite spring, right? Okay, so this is the experiment he did. All right, now you put a weight on, okay, and it created 1 unit of stretch in the spring. And then he added the same exact weight, and it moved it 2 units. Now, when he put the first unit of weight on this, yeah, he could have done this. He could have lifted it up here and then put it on the spring down here. And then when he adds the second one, he could have gone way up here, and then he could have gone over here with the weight, and he could have gone over here with the weight, and then he could put it on the spring. Now, obviously, when he puts it on the spring, the spring is already stretched. So this is the starting point. The object, as it's adding pressure to the spring, moves from here to here. The first one moves the scale from here to here, and the second one moves it from here to here. Same exact amount of motion in the spring. Same exact distance traveled. Same exact, the spring applied the same resistance per expansion. The spring doesn't get any harder to expand. It's just that you always have to apply, you have to leave the first weight on the spring. If you take the first weight off the spring, then yeah, the second weight can't weigh 2 pounds. No, it can only weigh 1 pound. Oh, just amazing bullshit.
By the rules. This is 1 time, this is 2 time.
So again, none of that happens. So just say it again, right? All you're doing is you lift the weight up, it compresses the spring an amount, okay, gravitationally. And the amount that it compresses the spring is the same distance from the same starting point where it made contact with the spring.
So we've got 2 now times 1. Now 2 times 1 is 2. So for the first unit of spring compression, we got 2.
So just a lie. So he's saying that somehow I did twice the amount of energy when I put the second object, the first object on it was twice as much energy as the second object. Okay, it's the same amount of gravitational force being applied, and it's just being applied for a distance, and that's all you're doing. Yeah. It's just lying that it's some other mechanism than a differential. You have to it'll always be the same amount that you have to lift something to compress the spring 1 pound. And it doesn't matter whether it's going from 6 pounds to 7 pounds or whether it's going from 1 pound, 0 pounds to 1 pound. Same exact amount of spring compression for the same amount of motion in your mass to get to the spring.
2 times 1 weight, and then we can lift the second weight up there to fully compress it. Well, that's only 1 pound, but it's 1 time, so that's just the 1. But look, adding them together now, Gary, we got 3.
So yeah, sorry, and it doesn't mean anything because you're adding nonsense. Okay, it didn't happen. You didn't have to lift this 2 units of distance. It's just idiotic.
3 units of energy total. Whereas by manually compressing the spring, we've used 2 units of energy total.
So now you're proving some new theory? What's the point? Again, what's the point of this gibberish? You're going to add the 2 to the 3 and come up with a new 5 theory? It's 5 times the energy? Just nonsense.
So your method, far removed from...
No, so there's no my method here. It's all lying. Again, he won't deal with the illustrations I've made clear. Those arguments, there's no my method involved here. He's just a liar.
Gaining some kind of free energy that you say science would predict is wrong. Your method would cost us more to compress the spring.
So again, it wouldn't. It's silly. It doesn't happen. There's nothing else to say. It takes a certain amount of energy to lift something to a point where it compresses the scale this amount, and that's the fact. And it's always the same amount of lifting energy. It's not going to change. Okay, so if I lift these both this high, and so the scale's already compressed down to here, right? And I'm going to pretend, well, look, I lifted it this high. No, I didn't. Didn't have to do that. It's just so ridiculous.
They're manually compressing it. But anyway, I thought that gave a nice idea of whether you want to admit that work has 2 components, not...
So I don't even know what that means. It has 2 components. You're adding 2 separate masses that have 2 units of energy, which is, like I said, I don't think there's any physicist in the universe who will say that I can put 2 batteries next to each other and somehow this one has 3 times the energy that this one has in terms of weight, energy, ability to apply force. They have exactly the same ability to add or contribute pushing force. This one isn't 3 times as heavy somehow. That's a fact. And your theory is nonsense.
Just force or pressure, but also the distance all the time. Either way, you get a clue of why it's not a linear ratio.
Alright, so he's claiming, again, he proved Hooke's, he has a video up. It says proving Hooke's law, and he sits there and he's denying his own video now.
Pressing the spring is not 1 unit of energy, and then doubly compressing it can't be another unit of energy. It has to be more energy.
So his own experiment proved it. Again, you put the 1 mass on, it moves the spring this much. You leave that mass on, and now you're going to add a second mass, and it compresses the spring exactly the same amount. So this only took the same added energy, 1 unit of added energy. Fact. 2 pounds weighs 2 pounds. 2 pounds has twice the force of gravity as 1 pound. Not 4 times the force of gravity.
To doubly compress it. Anyway. I think most people can see that, apart from Gary.
All right, look, what most people can do is fart. They can't think, they can't reason, they can't do logic. That's why the world's a shithole. Yeah, it's kind of obvious. Because people are just getting dumber and dumber, and you're doing everything you can to increase the idiocracy. This is, science by professional wrestlers.
Because I think his mind's warped. Thanks for watching.
So me believing that 2 pounds isn't 4 pounds means I have a warped mind. Oh, I see.
How to kill all mosquitoes in the area in just minutes. This simple but...
Autoplay crap.
On Gary's last...
Just to increase their ad revenue, right? Is there some other reason why YouTube does this except to increase ad revenue? Anyway. So, assuming SHM with period T and phase frequency tau, it's just what a waste of time. Okay, when lifting 1 mass 1 height equals 1 unit of energy, lifting a mass 2 heights equals 2 units of energy. So what is that? Is that saying anything? No. He who shall not be called by name says it takes less energy to lift X mass, X height if you lift it faster. What the fuck? It's just an absolute fact. That's how the space shuttle gets into space. That's how rockets work, is getting into space as quickly as possible. You'll use less fuel. The slower you go, the more fuel you'll consume, because you'll be fighting more gravity. So it's exactly the opposite of what I just drew here. Okay. These morons really can't understand these simple arguments. I mean, it's just so... you're just... you know, can they really be sincere? Nah, you're saying no, they can't. So they are. They're just despicable liars. You know, so just as you gain less from gravity, the faster you're going into a gravitational field. So the faster your previous velocity is, the less you can gain, because the less time you'll be in the gravity. Okay, 1 second versus 10 seconds. 10 seconds of gravitational pressure is 100. And it's an increase in your velocity. 1 second is 10. Same thing is true going out against gravity. So obviously, if you take 1 second to get to a location in space, okay, you'll only fight 9.8 meters per second of velocity acceleration against you, counterforce. But if you take 10 seconds, well, then it's 10 units of that force will be applied to you, that 9.8 meters of change in your velocity. And you will have to use a lot more energy to get to your location, because you'll be fighting a lot more gravity. Just a fact. It's just a huge efficiency fact that the faster you can get into space, a location in space, the less gravitational force you'll have to counter. It's just an absolute fact. Less friction. It's that simple. The faster you go, the less friction. And gravity is the same as friction. It's the same thing. It's just a cost. It's slowing you down. So the less of it you go through, the less you get slowed down. The less time you take to get across a stream, the less the stream bends you. It's an absolute fact. How can they deny those absolute facts? Alright, only 6.5 more years to go before he still doesn't understand. So this is Brozo. That's really brilliant. Yeah, fuck you people. In the ass till get dead. Get what you goddamn deserve, you lying scum. I hope some, moronic force of... I hope you get jihaded, frankly. I hope some pile of morons with some arrogant belief in absolute nonsense, attempts to impose their bullshit on you with this kind of silly arrogance. We all believe it. Our mullah says so. Our holy man, our ayatollah says so. Oh, fuck you people. God damn. You can't get it worse than you deserve. You really can't. So I hope you get exactly what you've earned in your life, you pieces of shit. Lying scum.